Imagine a man standing at the edge of a forest, staring into the dark unknown. Behind him is the world, fast, loud, digital, crowded with expectations. And ahead of him, silence, uncertainty, no path, no signal, just space. This is us. This is where we are now. The modern male stands in the middle of a spiritual desert, surrounded by noise yet haunted by emptiness. We were given everything: comfort, access, information, but somehow we lost the one thing that mattered: ourselves.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
What happened? How did we go from warriors, philosophers, builders, and seekers to anxious, confused, disconnected versions of ourselves? How did masculinity, once rooted in purpose, dissolve into performance? There's a silent crisis unfolding, not visible on the surface, not trending on social media, but buried deep in the soul of modern man. It's not just about success or failure, but it's about meaning. It's about identity. But it's about the erosion of something ancient, something sacred. Machiavelli once wrote, "Where the willingness is great, the difficulties cannot be great." But what if the willingness itself has disappeared? What if the modern man has been so numbed by convenience, comparison, and chaos that he no longer even knows what to will? That's the heart of the crisis. It's not that life is harder now, it's that our inner fire has gone dim. We've been told to chase money, status, and attention. But no one taught us how to chase truth. No one taught us how to face ourselves. Somewhere along the way, we outsourced our masculinity. We let culture, influencers, corporations define it for us. We stopped sitting with silence. We stopped enduring difficulty. We stopped asking the kind of questions that make your spine shiver. Questions like, what am I really afraid of? Who would I be without my validation? What pain have I been avoiding for years? These are not small questions. These are soul questions. And the man who dares to ask them is already on the path to rebirth. Look around. The average man is overstimulated but underdeveloped. He can scroll for hours but struggles to sit still for 10 minutes. He can argue online but can't look himself in the mirror. He can chase women but can't stay loyal to his own values. This isn't judgment, it's a wake-up call. We are not broken. We are buried. And if you're still watching, then something within you is hungry. Something is stirring. That's not weakness. That's the beginning of strength. Nietzsche wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But what is our why? Is it to impress, to compete, to accumulate? These are shallow whys. They collapse under pressure. The real why is forged in solitude, in suffering, in sacred struggle. It's not found in a course or a quote, it's discovered when you strip away every lie you've told yourself and ask, what am I really here for? The modern world has created men who are experts at pretending to be confident, pretending to be successful, but pretending to be happy. But deep down, many of us are tired of the mask, tired of the chase, tired of living a life that feels misaligned with our soul. And yet, we keep going because the alternative is terrifying. The alternative is stillness, reflection, change, but that's exactly what we need. We need to retreat not to escape, but to remember. The ancient sages, the warriors, the mystics, they all knew this. They went into the desert, into the cave, into isolation, not to be alone, but to reconnect. You can't hear your spirit when the world is too loud. You can't find your path if you're always following someone else's. The modern male crisis is not a crisis of capability, it's a crisis of connection. We have lost connection to our essence. Machiavelli warned, the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. So who do you have around you? Are they mirrors or masks? Do they call you higher or numb you lower? Real brotherhood is rare today. Most men are surrounded by competition, not connection. But a man's spirit cannot thrive in isolation or in false friendship. We need circles that challenge us, conversations that cut through the surface. We need other warriors on the path. But first, we must stop running from ourselves. We must stop using success as anesthesia. We must stop using women, work, and ambition as distractions from the aching question underneath it all. Who am I when no one's watching? That's where the restoration begins. Not with noise, not with goals, with raw, honest self-confrontation. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But becoming isn't automatic. It's violent. It's sacred. It requires the destruction of everything false. And that's exactly why most men avoid it. Because it means facing the father wound, facing the inner critic, facing the shame, the fear, the regret. But if you're willing to go there to enter your own darkness, you will find something no one can give you, your soul. You cannot borrow masculinity. You must awaken it. And awakening begins with awareness. What are your patterns? What are your addictions? What are the lies you keep telling to protect your image? The modern man has been trained to perform, not to feel. But until we feel deeply, we cannot heal. And until we heal, we cannot lead. This is where the journey splits. Some will keep chasing shadows. Some will keep numbing the pain. But a few, maybe you will choose initiation. The ancient path. The painful path. And the path of the inner warrior. And that path doesn't begin in the gym or the boardroom. It begins in the silence of your own heart, when you finally whisper, "I'm ready." Ready to stop blaming, ready to stop hiding, ready to take radical ownership of this life. Because no one is coming to save you. No one is coming to make you whole. That is your work. And that work is holy. It is the only work that matters. Everything else, money, women, status, success, becomes meaningful only when rooted in truth. So what is your truth? Not the one you post online. Not the one you tell in interviews. The one you feel at 2 a.m. when the world is asleep and your soul is awake. The one you've been avoiding. The one that scares you, and that truth is your map. And the moment you stop running from it, the crisis begins to shift. You begin to shift. The modern male spirit is not dead. It is dormant. It is waiting. And it is waiting for you not to impress, not to dominate, but to return. Return to courage. Return to presence. Return to integrity. Not perfection, presence. Not control, clarity. Not performance, power. Machiavelli wrote, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves." One must be both a fox and a lion. Apply this to your inner world. Be the lion, bold, decisive, disciplined. But also be the fox, introspective, strategic, aware. The man who learns to balance strength with stillness becomes unstoppable. So ask yourself this: are you willing to be alone with your thoughts long enough to meet the man you were meant to become? Are you willing to sacrifice your comfort for your calling? Are you willing to lose who the world told you to be in order to become who your soul has always known you are? If the answer is yes, then the crisis ends today not because the world changed, but because you did. What happens when the modern man stops pretending? When he finally takes off the mask, silences the noise, and stares into the mirror not to admire, but to understand? That moment is terrifying for most, because beneath the surface, many of us are not who we thought we were. We have identities built on performance, opinions shaped by algorithms, dreams borrowed from influencers, and confidence stitched together by likes. But none of that lasts. None of it holds up in silence. In that mirror, what we see is not weakness, it's emptiness. And that is the beginning of awakening. We were not born to be hollow. We were born to carry weight and to shoulder responsibility, to hold the line between chaos and order. But somewhere along the way, the weight was replaced with distraction. The burdens that once made men strong are now seen as inconveniences. And so, we scroll, we consume, we avoid. We laugh at things deep down we don't find funny, and we chase things that, when we finally catch them, leave us more lost than before. This is not freedom. This is spiritual sedation. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And yet, most men today live lives that are not only unexamined, but unchallenged. We've created a generation of men who are physically alive but spiritually asleep. We've mastered the art of external success while neglecting internal truth. We've been taught how to build careers, but not how to build character. We can lift weights, but we can't lift our own shame. We can chase women, but we can't sit with our wounds. This is the crisis. But here's the insane part. This collapse of spirit didn't happen by accident. It was designed. We live in a system that thrives on your disconnection, but because a disconnected man is easier to manipulate. He buys more, he scrolls longer, he competes harder, he feels weaker, and weak men are profitable. So you were never taught to go inward, to ask the hard questions, to stand still in your own silence. Because if you did, you'd wake up, and a man who wakes up becomes dangerous. Dangerous not in violence, but in presence, in clarity, in conviction. A man who has faced himself cannot be controlled. He becomes rooted. He becomes deliberate. He becomes the kind of man who doesn't need to shout, who doesn't need to prove, who doesn't seek attention because he has already found alignment. And that kind of man can shift families, communities, generations. That kind of man becomes a force. But to become that, you must suffer. Not because suffering is noble, but because comfort has made you soft. You must walk into the fire of your own doubt, your own grief, your own guilt. You must sit with the wounds you've buried under sarcasm, under work, under substances. You must stop pretending you're fine and start asking, why do I feel numb? Why do I feel like I'm always performing? Why do I feel like something's missing, even when everything looks good? The answers are not easy. They will not come quickly, but they are there, underneath the noise, in the silence, in the stillness. And the man who is brave enough to go there to enter his own internal wilderness will find something no one can take from him, self-respect. Not the kind built on achievements, but the kind built on truth. The kind that says, I know who I am because I've met the parts of me I used to run from. But Machiavelli wrote, tardiness often robs us of opportunity and the dispatch of our forces. The modern man is tardy not for meetings, but for his own soul. We delay the inner work. We say, "I'll confront it when I'm older," or "I'll figure it out later." But later becomes never. And one day you wake up and realize you've built a life that looks good from the outside, but feels like a prison on the inside. So what do? We must begin where most won't, by reclaiming responsibility. Not just for our careers or our bodies, but for our inner world. We must take ownership of our thoughts, our emotions, our triggers, our patterns. We must stop blaming the world, our parents, our exes, our circumstances. Yes, you were wounded. Yes, you were shaped by forces beyond your control. But healing is still your responsibility. Growth is still your obligation. No one is coming to do it for you. That's the first initiation, radical ownership. The second initiation is solitude, not isolation, solitude, the kind where you disconnect from the world so you can reconnect to yourself. The kind where you turn your phone off and your awareness on, where you stop absorbing everyone else's opinions and start listening to your own intuition. The modern man is drowning in voices that aren't his. Solitude is the only way to remember your own. And then comes the third initiation, discipline. Not the gym kind, the spiritual kind. The kind where you wake up early not to grind but to reflect. The kind where you meditate not to be calm but to face the chaos inside. And the kind where you commit to truth, even when it costs you comfort. Discipline is not punishment, it is devotion. Devotion to becoming a man your future self would be proud of. But none of this happens without pain. Pain is the portal, and most men avoid it at all costs. But what if pain wasn't the enemy? What if pain was the teacher? What if every breakdown, every heartbreak, every failure was not a sign of your weakness but an invitation to rise, to evolve, to awaken? Most men will numb the pain. You must learn to sit in it, to breathe through it, to ask it what it's trying to show you. Kierkegaard said, "The most common form of despair is not being who you are." And that is exactly where most men live, in quiet despair, because they are not expressing their truth. They are performing. They are complying. They are surviving. But deep down, they feel the fracture. They feel the disconnect, and they don't know how to fix it because they've never been shown the way back to themselves. But the way back is simple, not easy, but simple. You stop running, you stop pretending, you stop numbing, you face the parts of you you've been avoiding, you forgive yourself for your past, you take accountability for your present, and you make a sacred commitment to your future. That's the formula, that's the path. And it's not linear, it's not sexy, but it's real. And here's the paradox. As you do this inner work, the outer world begins to shift. Your relationships change, your posture changes, your energy changes. Not because you're performing, but because you're aligned. And people feel that. They feel the depth, and they feel the stillness. And they start to treat you differently, not because you demanded respect, but because you became respectable. This is how we begin to heal the modern male spirit, not through slogans, not through surface-level empowerment, but through radical, uncomfortable, beautiful self-reclamation. You were not born to be numb. You were born to feel. You were not born to be passive. You were born to lead. You were not born to be distracted. You were born to be present. But you must choose it every day. every moment. So now the question is, will you choose it? Will you stop waiting for permission and start walking the path? Will you stop settling for surface success and start seeking soul significance? Will you stop numbing your pain and start transforming it into power? Because the truth is, nothing's missing. You are not broken. You are simply disconnected. And the reconnection begins not in the world but within. There's a moment when a man, having stared into his pain, his doubt, and his silence long enough, realizes something unshakable. He was never meant to be who the world told him to be. He was meant to become something far deeper, far wilder, far more grounded. Not the caricature of masculinity sold through culture, but the embodiment of ancient strength fused with modern clarity. This moment is not loud. It doesn't arrive with applause. It comes quietly, like the first light of dawn after a long night of storms. And in this moment, the crisis begins to dissolve not because the world changed, but because the man did. The modern male spirit has been fragmented, split between who we are and who we perform to be. But when we stop performing, when we stop needing to be seen a certain way, we rediscover our wholeness. And from that wholeness, true strength emerges, not bravado, not dominance, but presence. The kind of presence that walks into a room and says nothing, yet shifts the energy. The kind that no longer reacts to disrespect, chaos, or temptation because it is rooted in truth. That's the destination. But the journey there is long, lonely, and holy. Machiavelli said, "The wise man does at once what the fool does at last." The pain most men postpone is the very pain that could liberate them. The healing most men delay is the healing that could make them. But our culture rewards delay. It says, "Don't worry about it." It says, "Just keep moving." It offers dopamine instead of discipline, distraction instead of depth. And the result? An epidemic of men who look fine but feel hollow, who smile in public but ache in private. But we do not have to stay there. The reclamation of the male spirit begins with a decision. Not a loud one, a quiet, internal vow: I will no longer betray myself. Because that's what most men are doing, betraying themselves daily. They say yes when they mean no. They stay in relationships that drain them. But they pour their time into pleasures that leave them emptier. And they silence the voice inside that whispers, "You were made for more." That betrayal becomes a habit, then a personality, then a life. And one day you wake up and realize you're living a story that isn't yours. But the good news is this: the story can be rewritten. Not by running away, but by returning to your core, your discipline, your truth. That return requires solitude. It requires stillness. It requires sitting alone and not reaching for your phone, your vices, your escapes. It requires letting the noise die so you can hear your own soul speak again. And when it does, it won't give you comfort. It will give you clarity, and that clarity will cost you. It will cost you denial. It will cost you illusions. It will cost you the version of yourself you've been pretending to be. But in its place, you will gain something greater: congruence, integrity, peace. Not peace as in pleasure, but peace as in alignment. And that feeling when your thoughts, your actions, and your spirit are all moving in the same direction. That's real power. That's real masculinity. And that's what we were born for. To carry weight, yes, but not in silence. To protect, yes, but not through suppression. To lead, yes, but not through ego. The awakened man doesn't dominate, he elevates. He doesn't silence, he listens. He doesn't perform, he embodies. And to become that man, you must be willing to lose everything that is false. You must be willing to suffer not for suffering's sake, but for soul's sake. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is endurable, then endure it." Stop complaining. The modern man complains. He blames. He avoids. But the ancient man, the true man, takes it all in stride not because it's easy, but because it's honorable. There is honor in carrying your weight. There is honor in keeping your word. There is honor in becoming the kind of man your younger self would admire and your future self would thank. The world desperately needs that kind of man again. We are not here to disappear into comfort. We are not here to be liked by everyone. We are not here to fit in. We are here to evolve, to challenge, to awaken, to become initiators of depth in a world that's drowning in surface. And that requires courage, the kind of courage that doesn't roar but whispers. I will keep going even when no one sees me. I will keep building even when no one claps. I will keep healing even when it hurts. And yes, it will hurt. The deeper you go, the more you will have to grieve the years you lost, the masks you wore, the people you allowed to stay too long, the dreams you abandoned out of fear. But grief is not weakness. Grief is proof that you care, that you still feel, and that you still want something real. And if you stay with it, if you breathe through it, on the other side of that grief is fire, purpose, vision. Brother, that's where your soul lives. You weren't meant to live a life of quiet desperation. You weren't meant to numb your fire. You weren't meant to conform to a culture that wants you distracted and docile. You were meant to walk with weight in your eyes and wisdom in your voice. You were meant to be the kind of man who can cry without shame and fight without ego. The kind of man who can sit in silence and still lead. The kind of man who doesn't just make noise but makes impact. So where do we go from here? We rise. Not once, daily. We rise through rituals, through truth, through cutting off what no longer serves and committing to what grows us. We rise by choosing brotherhood over isolation, and by choosing accountability over comfort, and by choosing truth over performance. The modern male crisis ends not when the world changes, but when one man decides to change, and then another, and another. That's how revolutions begin. Quietly, in the soul, in the dark. And if you're still here, you're already part of it. You're already answering the call. Not to be perfect, but to be real. Not to be invincible, but to be whole. You will fail, you will fall, but you will not walk backward. Because once you taste your own truth, you can never go back to pretending. And that is freedom. That is masculinity. That is spirit. So now I leave you with one final question, then not to answer with words, but with your life. What kind of ancestor do you want to become? Because whether you realize it or not, you are building a legacy. Every choice, every thought, every habit is laying bricks in the foundation of a future generation. Will they inherit your wounds or your wisdom, your excuses or your example, your distractions or your devotion? The modern male spirit is not lost. It is rising in you, and the only thing left to do is answer the call. Not tomorrow, not when it's convenient. Now, because the world doesn't need more men who follow. It needs men who remember who they are and who are willing to become that no matter what it costs.